She found a photograph of her billionaire husband kissing his supposed cousin in his briefcase, and the cousin's child had his unmistakable eyes. Instead of confronting him, she printed 1,000 copies and mailed them to every board member at his company the next morning, causing... Zoe Rowan had survived her father's abandonment, her first husband's 3-year affair, and building a $200 million AI company from nothing. But the photograph in Theo's briefcase brought her to her knees in a penthouse home office that smelled like Tom Ford cologne and shattered illusions. Saturday evenings had their rhythm. The charity gala would wind down around 11 p.m., the last donors departing with promises of future checks. Theo would loosen his tie while Zoe kicked off her heels. They'd share a nightcap at their kitchen bar, debriefing the evening's conversations. Then came the familiar dance, Theo searching frantically for his briefcase, needing to review contracts before Monday. Always misplaced, always left in the study or guest room, always retrieved by Zoe during her post-event cleanup routine. She'd bring it to him with a teasing smile, call him brilliantly absent-minded. He'd kiss her forehead and say he'd be completely lost without her organization. 5 years of this exact ritual at every major event, like a marriage ceremony repeated with champagne and crystal chandeliers. This Saturday started no differently. Zoe reached for the leather briefcase Theo had abandoned near the coat closet during the gala, felt the familiar weight, the expensive Italian leather he'd bought in Milan. The case was unlatched. He never closed it properly. A photograph slipped out as she lifted it, floated down, landed face up on the marble floor. Zoe's breath stopped. Theo, her Theo, kissing a woman Zoe barely knew, his cousin Sophia Logan, the only one he'd introduced exactly once at a family funeral 2 years ago. Sophia's lips pressed against Theo's, his hand cradling her face with devastating tenderness. But that wasn't what made Zoe's world tilt sideways. Behind them stood a child, a boy maybe 6 or 7, with Theo's distinctive, piercing blue eyes, that rare shade of ice blue that ran in his family, that he'd inherited from his father, that made strangers stop and stare. The child was looking up at them with those unmistakable Louis eyes, his small hand clutching Sophia's dress. The photograph looked recent, professional quality, glossy paper, vibrant colors. This wasn't a casual snapshot. This was printed, framed, carried, kept close. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. Instead, her body went very still, her mind shifting into the same cold, analytical mode that had built her fortune, the mode that saw patterns, calculated risks, eliminated threats before they could destroy her. The woman, Sophia, was beautiful, olive skin, elegant bone structure, mid-30s. She wore a black dress that looked expensive, tasteful. They stood in what looked like a private garden, somewhere intimate and deliberate. Not a family reunion, not a casual gathering. This was comfort, intimacy, history, and a child with Theo's eyes. Zoe picked up the photograph with 2 fingers, studied every detail with the precision she applied to due diligence reports. The way Sophia's body leaned into Theo's, the way his hand curved protectively around her waist, the way the child stood between them like he belonged there, like they were a family. When had this been taken? How long had Theo been living a double life? Was this why he took those business trips to Connecticut every month, always alone, always vague about the meetings? Cousin? He'd said cousin, but cousins didn't kiss like that, and cousins didn't produce children with those distinctive Louis eyes unless it was incest, unless it was worse than infidelity, unless her husband wasn't just a cheater, he was living an entire secret life with his own relative and their child. She could hear the catering staff cleaning up in the kitchen, could smell the roses from tonight's centerpieces, could see their life scattered around this penthouse, Theo's jacket on the chair, her evening bag on the console, the photo booth pictures from their anniversary party last month where they'd laughed like newlyweds. Everything looked the same, But everything had changed. Zoe stood slowly, photograph in hand, and walked to her home office. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. Instead, she did what she always did when she needed to destroy something that threatened her. She made a plan. By 3 a.m., her list was complete. 347 names. Every board member of Louis Capital Management, every major client, every financial journalist who'd ever covered Theo's firm, every business partner who trusted him with their money. By 5 a.m., she had uploaded the photograph to a print service, ordered 1,000 copies on premium stock. No note, no explanation, just the image. Her billionaire husband kissing his supposed cousin, with a blue-eyed child standing witness. By 6 a.m., she had addressed every envelope herself, writing each name in her careful script. Personal, deliberate, devastating. By 7 a.m., the packages were scheduled for morning delivery, Monday morning, when the markets would open, when the board would be gathering for their quarterly review, when Theo would arrive at his corner office expecting another successful week. Zoe returned to their bedroom as dawn broke over Manhattan. Theo was still sleeping, face peaceful, hand reaching across to her empty side of the bed. She looked at him, this man she'd loved, trusted, built a life with, and felt nothing but ice. By the time his alarm sounded at 7:30, his empire was already burning. He just didn't know it yet. Theo's phone started vibrating at 6:47 a.m., and it didn't stop. He reached for it instinctively, still half asleep, and saw the screen filled with notifications, 47 missed calls, 32 voicemails, texts flooding in so fast they blurred together. His board chair, his CFO, his head of investor relations, his mother. His mother never called before 9 a.m. He sat up, heart suddenly pounding, and scrolled through the messages. The words didn't make sense at first. Emergency meeting. Explain immediately. What the hell were you thinking? The photograph. The photograph. Theo's blood went cold. He looked to Zoe's side of the bed, empty, sheets pulled tight, pillows arranged perfectly, like she'd never slept there at all. He called Marcus, his CFO. Marcus answered before the first ring finished. "Tell me you have an explanation." Marcus's voice was raw. "Tell me there's some reasonable explanation for why I'm looking at a photograph of you kissing a woman with a child who has your eyes, and why 300 copies of this photograph were delivered to our entire board, our clients, and apparently the Wall Street Journal." Theo's mind went blank. Then it crashed into focus, sharp and terrible. The photograph. The one from his father's deathbed. The one he'd kept hidden in his briefcase because he couldn't bear to throw it away, but couldn't explain it either. The one moment of grief and reconciliation with Sophia captured forever. Zoe had found it, and she'd thought, oh God, she'd thought the worst, and she'd responded like a woman who'd been betrayed before. "I'm coming in," Theo said, already pulling on clothes. "Don't let anyone make statements. I'll explain everything." "You better," Marcus's voice cracked, "because Pemberton Industries just pulled $180 million. Mitchell Group called an hour ago. They're out. The photograph is on Bloomberg, Theo. It's everywhere." Theo drove to his office in 23 minutes, a trip that should have taken 45. Security met him at the elevator. Not his usual team, but corporate security, the ones who escorted people out when they were fired. They walked him to the 47th floor conference room in silence. Through the glass walls, he could see his partners gathered, faces rigid. Someone had printed the photograph and placed it in the center of the mahogany table like evidence at a trial. His phone buzzed. His mother. He answered. "Theodore." Her voice broke on his name. "People are saying terrible things. They're saying you have a secret family. They're saying—" She couldn't finish. She'd raised him alone after his father left, had built her entire life around protecting him from scandal. "Mom, I can explain. That's Sophia. That's—" But how could he explain without revealing everything, without telling her that his father had another daughter, that he'd been living a lie for 40 years? "I need to go," she whispered. "My friends are calling. They're asking if I knew." She hung up. Theo stood in the elevator lobby, watching his empire collapse through conference room windows. His partners were shouting now, gesturing at the photograph. His assistant approached carefully, holding a FedEx envelope. "This came with all the others, sir. It's addressed to you." Inside was a single copy of the photograph and a hotel room key card. The Peninsula, room 2847. Theo recognized Zoe's handwriting on the envelope, precise, controlled, devastating. He left his office, his partner still shouting, and drove to the hotel. Used the key card, opened the door to find their bedroom furniture had been delivered. Zoe's nightstand, her jewelry box, her side of the closet emptied into garment bags. She sat in the window seat, backlit by morning sun, wearing the same black dress from Saturday's gala. She didn't look at him. "Zoe? Don't." Her voice was diamond hard. "Don't you dare say her name. Don't you dare tell me she's your cousin. I saw his eyes, Theo. That child has your father's eyes." She finally turned. Her face was dry, composed, terrifying in its control. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been living this other life?" The knock came at 2:17 p.m., sharp and insistent. Zoe had sent Theo away 3 hours ago, refusing to hear his explanations, his desperate attempts to make her understand something she thought she understood perfectly. She'd watched him leave, shoulders slumped, his empire crumbling because she'd decided he deserved it. She opened the door, expecting hotel management. Instead, she found a woman in a charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, fury radiating from every controlled gesture. Sophia Logan, the woman from the photograph. Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit, a lawyer, clearly, with that particular brand of polished aggression that came from years of courtroom battles. "We need to talk," Sophia said, voice clipped. "Now." Zoe stepped back instinctively, and they entered like a storm front. Sophia dropped a file folder on the coffee table with enough force to scatter the hotel's complimentary notepad. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sophia's composure cracked. "My son came home from school today with a bloody nose because some parent told their kid that Oliver's uncle is a pervert who kisses his cousins. He's 7 years old, and he doesn't understand why people are calling him names, why his friends won't sit with him at lunch." Zoe's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. "Your son has my husband's eyes. That photograph was taken 6 months ago at Greenwich Hospital, at our father's deathbed. The father who spent 40 years pretending I didn't exist because acknowledging me would destroy his perfect family." The words hung in the air like smoke. "What are you talking about?" Zoe whispered. The lawyer opened his briefcase with clinical precision. "My client is Sophia Logan, born Sophia Chen. Her mother, Mei Chen, worked as executive assistant to Garrison Louis for 23 years. Ms. Logan is Mr. Louis's biological half-sister, a fact confirmed by DNA testing performed 2 years ago." He slid documents across the table. Official letterhead, laboratory results, genetic markers highlighted in yellow. "Theo only found out about me when he started going through Dad's papers after the first cancer diagnosis," Sophia said, softer now. "Dad called us both to the hospital when he knew he was dying. He wanted—" her voice broke. "He wanted us to know each other, to be family. That kiss you saw, that was me crying because my father finally said, 'I love you,' after a lifetime of being his dirty secret. Theo was trying to comfort me." Zoe's hands trembled as she picked up the DNA report. The numbers swam before her eyes, but the conclusion was clear. 24.7% shared DNA. Half-siblings, not lovers, not affair partners. Family. "Oliver's eyes," Zoe managed. "Come from my father, our father." Sophia's laugh was bitter. Those distinctive Louis blue eyes that skipped generations, that showed up in Oliver because genetics don't care about legitimacy or secrets or 40 years of shame. Zoe sank onto the couch, the document still clutched in her hands. The room tilted sideways. She'd destroyed an innocent man's reputation over a moment of grief between siblings. She'd printed 1,000 copies of evidence that proved nothing except her own catastrophic assumptions.
Theo kept this secret because telling anyone would devastate his mother. Sophia continued, standing over her now. She spent her entire marriage not knowing her husband had another family. He was trying to figure out how to support me and Oliver without exposing what Dad did. He was trying to protect everyone. The lawyer pulled out more papers. These are cease and desist letters prepared for every recipient of your packages. We're also preparing defamation suits. Your actions have cost Louis Capital Management an estimated $400 million in client withdrawals as of noon today. Zoe looked up at Sophia, seeing her clearly now. The elegant features that echoed Theo's bone structure. The way she held herself with that same careful dignity Theo's mother possessed. The pain of being unwanted written in every defensive angle of her body. I thought, Zoe's voice cracked, my first husband, he had an affair for 3 years. I thought Theo, you thought wrong, Sophia said flatly, and now my son is paying the price for your revenge. Now Theo's losing everything because you couldn't ask a single question before you decided to destroy him. She turned toward the door, lawyer following. For what it's worth, Sophia paused, hand on the doorknob. Theo talked about you constantly, how brilliant you were, how much he loved you, how he wanted to tell you about me but didn't know how without breaking his mother's heart. She shook her head. He didn't deserve this. Neither did Oliver. The door closed with surgical precision, leaving Zoe alone with DNA test results and the ruins of her terrible mistake.
The boardroom on the 48th floor felt like a courtroom, and Theo was already convicted before he sat down. 12 directors arranged around the black walnut table, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed satisfaction. Richard Pemberton sat at the head, the man who'd mentored Theo, who'd voted him CEO at 34, who'd pulled $180 million 3 days ago. Let's not waste time. Pemberton's voice was surgical. Theodore, you've put this firm in an untenable position. The photograph circulating shows you in what appears to be an inappropriate relationship with a family member. Whether that's true or not is almost irrelevant at this point. It's completely false, Theo said, keeping his voice level. That woman is my half-sister. The photograph was taken at our father's deathbed. Your half-sister? Diana Chen, head of the audit committee, leaned forward. A half-sister you never disclosed in any of your conflict of interest statements. A half-sister whose existence you hid from this board for 2 years. My father's affair wasn't relevant to firm business. Everything is relevant when it costs us $500 million. Marcus, his own CFO, slid a report across the table. As of 9 a.m. this morning, we've lost $467 million in client withdrawals. Another $200 million is pending review. Our institutional investors are demanding answers we can't provide because you kept us in the dark. The conference room door opened. Every head turned. Zoe walked in carrying a leather portfolio, dressed in a navy suit that meant business. Theo's stomach dropped. He'd specifically told her not to come, that her presence would only make things worse. Mrs. Louis, this is a closed board meeting, Pemberton started. I'm aware. Zoe's voice was steady, the same tone she'd used pitching to venture capitalists. I'm also aware that I'm the reason you're having this meeting, so you're going to hear what I have to say. She opened the portfolio and began distributing documents with practiced efficiency. DNA test results confirming Sophia Logan shares 24.7% genetic markers with Theodore Louis. Their father's death certificate from Greenwich Hospital, dated 6 months ago. Sophia's birth certificate listing Chen Wei as father. Their biological father never legally acknowledged her because he was married to someone else for 40 years. Diana picked up the DNA results, scanning them with an accountant's attention to detail. The photograph, Zoe continued, was taken at Garrison Louis' deathbed when he asked his children to know each other after a lifetime of secrecy. The child in the background is Sophia's son Oliver, who shares genetic traits with his grandfather, not his uncle.
This is fascinating, Pemberton interrupted, but it doesn't change our fundamental problem. Whether Theodore was having an affair or covering up his father's affair, he hid material family information from this board. That shows poor judgment at best, active deception at worst. The poor judgment was mine, Zoe's voice cracked slightly. I found the photograph and assumed the worst because my first husband had an affair. I printed 1,000 copies and mailed them to destroy Theodore's reputation before asking a single question. He's guilty of trying to protect his mother from knowing her marriage was a lie. I'm guilty of everything else. The board sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Robert Hashimoto from the Compliance Committee spoke. Mrs. Louis, we appreciate your honesty, but the damage is done. Our clients don't care about family drama. They care that their fund manager is embroiled in a scandal that's making headlines in every financial publication. Then let me fix it, Zoe said. I'll hold a press conference. I'll explain everything publicly. I'll take full responsibility. No, Theo stood. This is my firm, my responsibility. I'll face whatever consequences the board decides. Pemberton looked around the table, reading his colleagues' expressions. We're looking at two options: immediate resignation with a severance package, or 2 weeks to stop the bleeding. If you can stabilize client confidence and prevent further withdrawals, we'll reconsider. But Theodore, understand this. One more major client walks, one more piece of negative press, and we're done. 2 weeks, Theo said. 2 weeks, Pemberton confirmed, during which time you'll work with our PR firm, face every client personally, and prove this firm's reputation can survive your family secrets. He paused. I'm sorry, Theodore. I truly am, but $467 million buys a lot of doubt. The board filed out, leaving Theo and Zoe alone in the room with scattered DNA reports and the wreckage of a career built over 15 years. 2 weeks, Zoe whispered. How do we fix this in 2 weeks? Theo looked at her, exhausted beyond measure. I have absolutely no idea.
The lawsuit arrived by courier at 6 p.m., professionally bound, devastatingly thorough. Zoe sat in the hotel suite reading 53 pages of legal language that translated to one simple truth. Her revenge was going to cost her everything she'd built. Louis Capital Management, LLC versus Zoe Rowan Louis. Defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Damages sought, $50 million, plus punitive damages to be determined at trial. Her phone rang. Melissa Chang, her corporate attorney for the past 8 years. Tell me you didn't actually do this. Melissa's voice was tight. Tell me you didn't mass mail a private photograph to 347 people with the deliberate intent to destroy your husband's business. I did. Zoe's voice was hollow. Jesus, Zoe. Papers rustled on Melissa's end. They have receipts, literally, FedEx tracking numbers for every single package. They have your credit card statement showing the print order. They have testimony from the hotel business center staff who helped you collate and address envelopes for 3 hours. A pause. This isn't defensible. You didn't discover illegal activity. You didn't expose fraud. You distributed a private family photograph to cause maximum professional damage based on an assumption that turned out to be completely wrong. I know. Do you? Because $50 million would wipe out most of your liquid assets, and that's before we get to punitive damages. A jury is going to hear that you destroyed a man's career over a photo of him grieving at his father's bedtime. They're not going to be sympathetic. Zoe closed her eyes. What do I do? You settle. You apologize, and you pray they're willing to accept something less than complete financial annihilation. After Melissa hung up, Zoe made the mistake of opening her laptop. The headlines were everywhere, each one worse than the last. Tech entrepreneur's jealous rampage costs firm $500 million.
Billionaire marriage implodes. Wife exposes husband's secret half-sister. When suspicion becomes sabotage, the Zoe Rowan story. Page 6 had already dug up photos from her first divorce, Marcus grinning with his pregnant girlfriend. The narrative was writing itself. Scorned woman with trust issues destroys innocent man's life. Her mother arrived the next morning, suitcase in hand, expression granite hard. "Mama," Zoe started. "Don't." Gloria Rowan set her bag down with the same controlled precision she'd used when Zoe was 17 and came home past curfew. "You raised me better than this." "I don't understand." "I understand you found a photograph and decided to burn your husband's life to the ground without asking a single question." Gloria sat, folding her hands. "I understand that your trauma from Marcus made you dangerous. Not careful, not protective. Dangerous." The word landed like a slap. "When Marcus cheated, you had every right to leave. You had every right to be angry." Gloria's voice softened slightly. "But baby, you never dealt with it. You just built walls and called it healing. You made money and called it moving on. And the second you felt threatened again, you didn't protect yourself. You went nuclear. He had a secret family. He had a secret sister, a sister he was trying to protect from the same kind of scandal you just created." Gloria leaned forward. "Zoe, I love you, but you need help, real help. Not another divorce, not another fresh start. Therapy. Deep, difficult therapy about why you'd rather destroy than trust." The words hung between them, true and terrible. "I've already lost everything," Zoe whispered. "His career, our marriage, my reputation." "Then you have nothing left to lose by getting honest about why you did this." 3 days later, Zoe sat in Dr. Patricia Morrison's office in Midtown, a space designed for comfort but feeling like exposure. Dr. Morrison specialized in betrayal trauma, came highly recommended, and had an opening because of a cancellation. "Tell me about Marcus," Dr. Morrison said after the preliminaries. And Zoe did. She talked about finding the pregnancy announcement, about the 3 years of lies, about how she'd rebuilt herself into someone who would never be blindsided again, someone who saw threats coming and eliminated them first. "You developed a preemptive strike strategy," Dr. Morrison noted. "Protect yourself by attacking before you can be hurt." "It worked," Zoe said defensively. "I built a $200 million company. I was successful, safe." "Were you? Or were you just alone until Theo convinced you it was safe to try again?" Dr. Morrison set down her pen. "And the moment you felt that old fear, abandonment, betrayal, being made a fool, you deployed your protection strategy. Except this time, the threat wasn't real." Zoe's hands trembled in her lap. "I destroyed an innocent man." "Yes," Dr. Morrison said gently, "you did. And now we're going to figure out why, so you never do it again." Outside the window, Manhattan moved on, indifferent to her catastrophe. But in this room, finally, Zoe began the work of understanding the weapon she'd made of her own pain.
Sophia's call came during Zoe's therapy session, her voice fractured with panic. "Oliver's missing. The school called. He ran out during recess. I've been driving around for 40 minutes. I don't know where—" A sob cut through. They were calling him names, terrible names, and he just ran. Zoe was already grabbing her coat. "I'm coming. Where are you?" "Upper West Side, near the school." Sophia's breathing was ragged. "Theo's on his way. Please, he's 7 years old and it's 40 degrees and—" "We'll find him," Zoe promised, already running for the elevator. She called Theo from the taxi. He was closer, already coordinating with Sophia, thinking like someone who understood how a scared child's mind worked. "The playground near 81st. That's where I used to take him on Saturdays before—" He didn't finish. "Before everything exploded." Zoe found them 15 minutes later, Sophia pacing near the entrance, mascara streaked, and Theo moving methodically through the park, checking behind trees, under benches, calling Oliver's name with steady calm. "There," Zoe pointed, to a dense cluster of rocks near the north end, the kind of place a small body could wedge itself into and disappear. She saw the flash of a blue jacket, the same shade Oliver had been wearing in the photograph that started this nightmare. Theo was already moving, dropping to his knees beside the rocks. "Oliver, buddy, it's Uncle Theo. Your mom's here. We've been looking everywhere for you." A small voice, muffled and thick with tears. "I don't want to go back to school." "Okay, you don't have to. Not today." Theo kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "But you're freezing, and your mom is really scared. Can you come out so we can talk?" Slowly, a small figure emerged from the rocks. Oliver's face was red and puffy, his jacket torn at the sleeve, dirt smeared across his cheeks. Those unmistakable blue eyes, Garrison Louis's eyes, were swimming with confusion and hurt. Sophia rushed forward, pulling Oliver into her arms, checking him for injuries with shaking hands. "Baby, you can't run away like that. You can't—" Oliver's voice was small, testing the word like it might explode. "They said I'm a bastard. They said Uncle Theo is bad, and you're bad, and I'm bad because of something about families and kissing and—" He looked up at Theo, bewildered. "I don't understand why everyone's so mad." Theo glanced at Zoe, then back at Oliver. He sat cross-legged on the cold ground, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. "Can I tell you something about families?" Oliver nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Families are complicated. Sometimes people in families look alike because they share something called DNA. It's like a recipe that makes you who you are. You have blue eyes like me because we got them from the same person, my dad, who was also your grandfather." "But he wasn't really my grandfather," Oliver said quietly. "Mom said he couldn't be because of grown-up reasons." "He was your grandfather," Theo said firmly. "He just made some mistakes a long time ago, big mistakes that hurt a lot of people. And when he was dying, he asked me and your mom to be family anyway, even though it was complicated." Oliver considered this, his child's mind trying to process adult failures. Is that why people are mad? Because of the mistakes? People are mad because grown-ups did a really bad job of explaining things. Theo looked directly at Zoe when he said it. Sometimes, when adults are scared or hurt, they make really big mistakes trying to protect themselves. And sometimes those mistakes hurt people who don't deserve it, like you. "Did you make a mistake?" Oliver asked. "I kept secrets when I should have told the truth," Theo admitted. "I thought I was protecting people, but I was really just making things worse." Turning to Zoe, studying her with those devastating blue eyes, Oliver asked, "Did you make a mistake too?" Zoe's throat closed. She knelt beside Theo, meeting Oliver's gaze. "Yes, I made a terrible mistake. I saw a picture of you and your mom and Uncle Theo, and I thought it meant something bad. So I showed that picture to a lot of people, and now everyone is confused and angry, and you're the one getting hurt because of what I did." "Are you going to fix it?" Oliver asked, with the directness only children possess. "We're trying," Zoe whispered. "I'm so sorry, Oliver. You didn't deserve any of this." Oliver leaned against his mother, exhausted from running and fear. Sophia stroked his hair, her own tears falling silently. Theo pulled off his coat and wrapped it around Oliver's shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so paternal, that Zoe's chest ached watching it. This man would have been an extraordinary father, and she'd destroyed that future along with everything else. "Can we go home?" Oliver asked his mother. "Yes, baby, we can go home." As they walked toward the park exit, Oliver's small hand tucked into Theo's larger one, Zoe saw the family they could have been. The life where Theo and Sophia and Oliver existed openly, where Sunday dinners included this complicated, beautiful connection, where children didn't run away because adults couldn't handle the truth. She'd burned that possibility to ash because she was too afraid to ask one simple question. The lawyers were unanimous. A press conference was career suicide. You never explain, you never apologize, you never give them more ammunition. James Rothstein, Theo's crisis management attorney, paced the conference room like a caged animal. The story is already dying down. In 2 weeks, something else will dominate the news cycle. In 2 weeks, Theo will be voted out. Zoe stood her ground, voice steady despite the 8 pairs of skeptical eyes fixed on her. We have 11 days left to stabilize client confidence. Hiding isn't working. The speculation is getting worse. I saw a Twitter thread yesterday claiming Theo's running a Ponzi scheme to fund his secret family. Let them speculate, Melissa, Zoe's attorney interjected. Responding gives credibility to conspiracy theories. No, Theo's voice cut through the argument. He'd been silent for 20 minutes, listening, but now he stood beside Zoe. Secrets created this disaster. My father's secret affair, my secret about Sophia, Zoe's trauma from her first marriage. Every single catastrophic decision we made came from hiding instead of trusting. He looked at James. I'm done with secrets. Theo, James started. Set up the press conference. Tomorrow. The plaza. I want Sophia there with her lawyer. I want DNA evidence. I want the hospital records from my father's bed death. Everything. James closed his eyes like he was watching a client walk off a cliff. If this goes wrong, there's no recovery. You understand that? If we don't try, there's no recovery anyway, Zoe said quietly. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the plaza's grand ballroom. By 1:30, 73 media outlets had confirmed attendance. Financial press, tabloids, local news, even international correspondence. The Billionaire family scandal had transcended business news into cultural spectacle. Zoe stood backstage, hands trembling, watching the room fill with cameras and reporters hungry for blood. Sophia appeared beside her, elegant in a cream suit, her lawyer shadowing her like a bodyguard. I'm terrified, Sophia admitted quietly. Me too. I'm sorry for all of this, for what my mistake did to you and Oliver. Sophia studied her for a moment. My mother spent 20 years as a secret. I spent my entire childhood being the daughter no one could acknowledge. I know what secrets cost. She paused. So, let's try truth instead. At exactly 2 p.m., they walked out together, Theo, Zoe, and Sophia, presenting a united front that made the room fall silent. Theo spoke first, his voice steady. I'm here to provide context for the photograph that has circulated over the past week. The woman in that photograph is Sophia Logan, my half-sister. She is the daughter of my father, Garrison Louis, and her mother, May Chen. This relationship was confirmed by DNA testing 2 years ago. He held up the laboratory report. We share 24.7% genetic markers, consistent with half-siblings. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters started shouting questions. Sophia stepped forward. That photograph was taken at Greenwich Hospital on March 15th, 6 months ago. Our father was dying of pancreatic cancer. He called us both to his bedside because he wanted us to know each other after 40 years of secrecy. That kiss was my brother comforting me while I cried. Her voice was strong, clear. My son Oliver shares genetic traits with his grandfather, not his uncle. Anyone suggesting otherwise is spreading false and damaging information about a 7-year-old. Then Zoe moved to the microphone, and the room seemed to lean forward. I found that photograph in my husband's briefcase. Based on trauma from my previous marriage, I assumed the worst without asking a single question. I printed 1,000 copies and mailed them to his board, clients, and business partners with the deliberate intent to destroy his reputation. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. I was completely wrong, catastrophically wrong, and I take full responsibility for every dollar lost, every client who left, every piece of suffering this has caused. Theo Louis is guilty only of trying to protect his mother from learning her marriage was based on lies. I'm guilty of everything else. The questions came like gunfire. Why did Theo hide his half-sister? Why didn't Zoe ask before acting? Would they divorce? Would Theo resign? Theo fielded them with painful honesty. Yes, he should have disclosed Sophia to the board. Yes, he was trying to protect his mother, but understood that looked like deception. Yes, he and Zoe are in intensive therapy trying to rebuild trust. The press conference lasted 47 minutes. By the time they walked off stage, Zoe's hands were shaking so badly Theo had to guide her. The response was swift and fractured. Public sentiment shifted dramatically. Social media filled with sympathy for the secret sister, anger at the father who'd hidden his daughter for 40 years, and surprising support for Zoe's brutal honesty about her mistake. But the institutional investors remained cold. 2 days after the press conference, Pemberton called with the numbers. Public opinion had improved, but only $85 million had been recovered. They were still down $382 million with 9 days until the board's deadline. The truth helped, Pemberton said, his tone carefully neutral. But truth doesn't pay back losses. You're running out of time, Theodore.
Dr. Morrison's office became their second home. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 p.m., 90 minutes each session. No cancellations, no excuses. Theo sat on one end of the beige couch, Zoe on the other. A careful 18 inches of space between them that sometimes felt like miles. "Let's start with what you need from each other," Dr. Morrison said during the first joint session. "Not what you think you should need, what you actually need to feel safe in this marriage." Theo spoke first. "I need to know that the next time Zoe's scared or suspicious, she'll talk to me before she acts, that she'll give me a chance to explain before she assumes I'm my father." Zoe's chest tightened. "I need to know there won't be a next time, that there are no more secrets waiting to detonate, that I'm not going to discover something else you've been hiding to protect me." "So, trust," Dr. Morrison said. "You both need trust, but neither of you knows how to build it after it's been shattered." They started with rules, small, concrete things they could control when everything else felt chaotic. No phones during dinner. They ate together at their kitchen island. Theo had moved back into the penthouse, though he still slept in the guest room, and talked about mundane things, work without secrets, family without landmines. Sometimes they just sat in silence, but they sat together. Weekly truth talks every Sunday morning, 2 hours where they shared fears, insecurities, anything that felt like it might grow into something dangerous if left unspoken. The first one was excruciating. Zoe admitting she still sometimes looked through Theo's phone. Theo confessing he'd started having panic attacks before board meetings. A promise to ask questions first, before assuming, before acting, before destroying. For 3 weeks, they followed the rules religiously. The board gave Theo a conditional reprieve. He'd recovered $127 million through personal client meetings, brutal honesty, and sheer force of will. It wasn't enough, but it was progress. Zoe settled the defamation lawsuit for $18 million, a number that made her physically ill, but was better than $50 million plus punitive damages. They were healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. Then Theo came home at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Zoe saw the guilt written across his face before he said a word. "Where were you?" She kept her voice level, fighting every instinct that screamed, "Here we go again." Client dinner. It ran late. Which client? A pause. Too long. Sarah Matsumoto from Vertex. Zoe's stomach dropped. The woman you never mentioned you were meeting. It wasn't... Theo stopped. Started again. It was a last-minute thing. She called this afternoon wanting to discuss whether Vertex would reinvest. I didn't think... You didn't think you needed to tell your wife you were having dinner with a woman? Zoe's voice rose. After everything we've been through, after every promise about transparency, you just forgot to mention it? I didn't forget. I just... Theo ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. It was business, Zoe, pure business. I didn't want you to worry about something that was completely innocent. So you hid it. Again. Zoe grabbed her phone. I'm calling Dr. Morrison. It's 9:30 at night. I don't care. Her hands were shaking now, that familiar ice creeping back into her chest. You promised. No secrets, even small ones, especially small ones.
Dr. Morrison answered on the third ring, and bless her, didn't hesitate. "I can see you in 40 minutes, my office." They sat in her office at 10:15 p.m., the building mostly empty, emergency lighting casting strange shadows. Dr. Morrison looked alert despite the hour, like she'd been expecting this call eventually. "Tell me what happened," she said. They talked over each other at first, then took turns. Theo explaining that he genuinely thought a business dinner didn't need disclosure. Zoe explaining why any undisclosed meeting with a woman felt like betrayal waiting to happen. "Theo," Dr. Morrison said, "you're reverting to your old pattern, privacy as protection. Not telling Zoe about Sarah because you didn't want to worry her is the same logic you used for not telling her about Sophia. It's not the same. It's exactly the same. You're still deciding what Zoe needs to know instead of letting her decide for herself." Theo was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. God, you're right. I didn't even see it." Dr. Morrison turned to Zoe. "And Zoe, your instinct when Theo slipped up was to call me, not to detonate. That's progress. But I heard your voice when you said, 'Here we go again.' Part of you was already writing the ending." "Because I know how this story goes," Zoe whispered. "You know how one story went, with Marcus. But Theo isn't Marcus, and you're not the woman who stayed silent for 3 years. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "This is the work. Theo learning that transparency isn't optional when it's convenient. You learning that one mistake doesn't mean total betrayal. Both of you learning to repair instead of retreat." They sat with that for a moment. Then Theo reached across the space between them and took Zoe's hand. "I'm sorry. I should have called you from the restaurant. Should have said, 'Sarah wants to meet, is that okay?' Should have done anything except assume you didn't need to know." "I'm sorry I went straight to catastrophe," Zoe replied. "You came home. You told me where you were. You didn't lie." "I didn't lie," Theo agreed, "but I didn't tell the whole truth either." They sat in Dr. Morrison's office until midnight, dissecting every moment, every choice, every feeling. It was exhausting. It was necessary. And when they finally went home, Theo didn't go to the guest room. He followed Zoe to their bedroom, and they fell asleep on opposite sides of the bed, still not touching, but no longer running.
6 months after the press conference, Theo came home with an envelope that felt heavy with possibility and threat. They'd established their rhythms by now. Dinner at 7, phones silenced, truth talks every Sunday. Theo was back in their bedroom, though some nights one of them still migrated to the guest room when the weight of rebuilding felt too heavy to share. Louis Capital had stabilized at 73% of its former value, not recovered, but breeding. Theo had stepped back from CEO to chairman, a demotion that felt like survival. The board had stopped calling for his resignation, but the trust was fractured, perhaps permanently. "I need to show you something," Theo said, sliding the envelope across their kitchen island. Zoe opened it, scanning the letterhead. Redwood Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious firms. Her stomach tightened as she read. They were offering Theo the CEO position, $3 million base salary, equity package that could be worth tens of millions, full autonomy to rebuild their West Coast operations, a chance to start over 3,000 miles from the scandal that had defined their last year. "San Francisco," Zoe said quietly. "They approached me 3 weeks ago. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." Theo's voice was careful, measured. "It's an incredible opportunity, but it would mean leaving everything. Sophia and Oliver, your business network, the life we've built here." Zoe's old instincts kicked in immediately. He was planning an exit. He was going to take the job and leave her behind, start fresh without the wife who'd destroyed his reputation. This was abandonment dressed up as opportunity. She could feel Dr. Morrison's voice in her head. "Ask questions before you assume. Give him a chance to explain." "What do you want to do?" Zoe asked, instead of accusing. Theo looked surprised by the question. "I don't know.
Part of me wants to run as far from New York as possible, start somewhere people don't immediately think that's the guy whose wife exposed his family secrets. But the other part, he stopped, struggling. I just started really knowing Sophia and Oliver. I can't imagine leaving them, and I can't imagine asking you to give up everything you've built here. So you haven't decided? I wanted to talk to you first. Actually talk, not just announce a decision. He managed a tired smile. Therapy's paying off. Zoe stared at the offer letter, at the numbers that represented freedom from the wreckage of the last year. Her first instinct was to say no, to hold tight to New York where she had control, connections, safety. But safety had almost cost her everything. What if we both went? The words surprised her as much as they surprised Theo. What? I've been consulting with startups since I sold my company. Most of my work is remote anyway. Zoe's mind was already moving, calculating, planning, but this time planning a future instead of revenge. I could open a West Coast office for my consulting practice. The tech scene in San Francisco is better from New York for what I do anyway. You can't uproot your entire life. Why not? You were willing to consider it. She set down the letter. Sophia and Oliver, we could fly back once a month, or they could visit us. It's not abandonment if we're intentional about maintaining the relationship. Theo was staring at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You'd move to San Francisco? For us? For us, Zoe confirmed. Not because you're forcing me, not because I'm afraid you'll leave if I don't, because maybe a fresh start isn't running away. Maybe it's choosing to build something new. Something broke in Theo's expression. His eyes filled with tears, and he turned away quickly, trying to hide them. Hey, Zoe moved around the island, touching his arm gently. What is it? This whole year you've been trying to fix what you broke, making amends, going to therapy, doing the work. His voice cracked. But this is the first time you've chosen our future over your fear. The first time you've taken a risk on us instead of protecting yourself first. Zoe's own eyes sting. He was right. Every step of their recovery had been about repairing damage, not about building forward. This was different. This was trust. I'm terrified, Zoe admitted. I'm terrified this is a mistake, that we'll get to San Francisco and everything will fall apart anyway, that I'm giving up my safety net for something that might not survive. I'm terrified too, Theo said, but I'm more terrified of staying here, playing it safe, and never knowing if we could have been something more than just survivors of our own disaster. They stood in their kitchen, the skyline of Manhattan glittering behind them through floor-to-ceiling windows, and made a choice that felt like falling and flying at the same time. Let's do it, Zoe said. Let's go to San Francisco. Let's build something new. Theo pulled her into his arms for the first time in months, and she let herself be held, let herself believe that maybe they could be more than the sum of their mistakes. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I never stopped. I love you too, and I'm going to keep choosing us, even when I'm scared, especially when I'm scared. Outside, the city that had witnessed their destruction hummed with indifferent life, but inside, two people who almost lost everything began planning a future built not on secrets or revenge, but on the radical, terrifying act of trust.
Oliver's 10th birthday party was held in Sophia's backyard in Marin County, 20 minutes from the San Francisco home Zoe and Theo had bought 3 years ago. The California sun was gentler than Manhattan's glare. The air smelled like eucalyptus and possibility, and Oliver was currently destroying his friends at laser tag while adults pretended not to be competitive about the buffet line. Zoe stood near the dessert table, one hand resting unconsciously on the swell of her belly, 5 months along, finally past the terrifying first trimester that had felt like holding her breath underwater. Theo appeared beside her with a plate of fruit, the protective gesture so automatic now she barely noticed it. Your mother's teaching Oliver's friends poker, Theo said, amused. "Should we be concerned?" Zoe looked over to see Gloria Rowan, now 71 and showing no signs of slowing down, demonstrating card-shuffling techniques to a group of fascinated 10-year-olds. "She'll have them counting cards by the end of the party. Let her have her fun." Across the yard, Sophia stood with her husband, David, a patent attorney she'd met 2 years ago at a grief support group. Both of them children of complicated fathers, both of them learning to build families from fractured pieces. They were expecting their second child, a girl, due in 3 months. And there, sitting in a lawn chair with a glass of lemonade, was Eleanor Louis, Theo's mother, the woman Zoe had been certain would never forgive her. It had taken 18 months. 18 months of Sunday phone calls, of Theo flying back to New York alone at first, of Eleanor processing 40 years of marriage built on her husband's betrayal. But eventually, she'd asked to meet Sophia, then Oliver, and finally, with Dr. Morrison's guidance, she'd agreed to family therapy. "I was so angry at first," Eleanor had said during one session, her refined voice shaking. "Angry at Garrison for lying, angry at Sophia for existing, angry at Theodore for keeping secrets, angry at you, Zoe, for exposing everything so publicly." She'd looked directly at Zoe then. "But I realized I was most angry at myself for never asking the questions I knew needed asking, for choosing comfort over truth for 40 years. Now Eleanor sat watching her grandson play, her hand occasionally touching the locket she wore, a new one, containing photos of both her sons, Theo and Oliver, because she decided that's what he was. Family didn't require legal acknowledgement. It required choice. "Family photo," David called out, waving his camera. "Come on, everyone, let's get the whole crew." They assembled in layers, Oliver front and center, grass-stained and grinning, Sophia and David flanking him, her hand on his shoulder, Eleanor sitting regally in her chair, Theo and Zoe standing behind, along with Gloria, who'd abandoned her poker students for posterity. As they positioned themselves, adjusting for the camera's frame, Theo's hand found its way to Zoe's belly. The gesture was protective, proprietary, and entirely unconscious. She felt the baby flutter in response, as if acknowledging her father's touch. "Say new beginnings," David called out, finger poised on the shutter. Zoe looked around at this impossible family, the secret sister who'd become a friend, the nephew who called Theo uncle with pride instead of shame, the mother-in-law who'd chosen radical acceptance over comfortable denial, the grandmother who'd taught her that survival wasn't enough, you had to choose life, repeatedly, even when it was terrifying. 3 years ago, a photograph destroyed everything. One image of grief and reconciliation, misunderstood, weaponized, turned into a scandal that cost millions and nearly ended them all. This photograph would be different. The shutter clicked. This time, it captured Theo's hand on Zoe's pregnant belly, the visible proof that they'd built something new from the ruins. It captured Oliver's gap-toothed grin, no longer the confused child hiding in Central Park, but a boy secure in his complicated family. It captured Sophia standing tall beside her new husband, no longer the secret daughter, but a woman claiming her rightful place. It captured Eleanor's slight smile, the expression of someone who'd survived the truth and found it preferable to comfortable lies. It captured Gloria's knowing look, the grandmother who'd delivered harsh truths with love and refused to let her daughter run from the work. And it captured Zoe and Theo standing together, not because they'd avoided catastrophe, but because they'd walked through fire and chosen each other on the other side. Later, when David posted the photo to the family group chat, Zoe stared at it for a long time. They looked happy. Not perfect. Theo's tie was crooked, Oliver had frosting on his cheek, someone had blinked, but happy. "What are you thinking?" Theo asked, appearing behind her with his arms circling her waist, hands resting on their growing child. "I'm thinking about the other photograph, the one that started everything." Do you regret it? Not what you did with it, but that it happened at all." His voice was careful. Zoe considered this. Without that photograph, they would have continued. Theo keeping secrets out of misguided protection, Zoe building walls instead of bridges, both of them pretending their marriage was solid while foundations cracked beneath them. "No," she said finally. "I regret how I handled it. I regret the pain I caused. But that photograph forced us to become real, to build something honest instead of comfortable." Theo kissed the top of her head. "Dr. Morrison would be proud of that answer." "Dr. Morrison is proud we haven't needed her in 6 months." They stood together watching Oliver chase his friends through the yard. This child who'd been called terrible names because of adult mistakes, who'd run away scared and been found by people who learned to love him properly. This family that shouldn't exist by any conventional standard, but did exist because they all chose truth over comfort, again and again and again. 3 years ago, a photograph exposed secrets. Today, a photograph captured survival. And inside Zoe's belly, a new life fluttered. Proof that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens is also the beginning of everything that matters.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. We love you.